What up, y'all? Babylon 5 Podcast. It's your boy, Jermaine Event. How are you guys doing? This is episode 202. And, I think if I had to name this episode, it would be, UFC 290 is stacked. Ladies and gentlemen, UFC 290 is stacked. Stacked. We're going to talk about that card. Obviously, very stacked card. Volkanovski, Yair. But also the third match between Brandon Moreno and Alexandre Pantoja. I just watched their second fight, and I've definitely seen some improvements in Moreno, so we're going to talk about that fight. I've seen improvements in both fighters since that fight. But that card is absolutely stacked. We're going to briefly touch on UFC Vegas 76, headlined by Sean Strickland versus Abus Magomedov. I thought it was a pretty good card last night, ladies and gentlemen, if I do say so myself. It's a pretty entertaining card. I didn't watch every fight. Being that we have the capability here to watch, I pay for ESPN Plus, I can watch the fights whenever. I'm starting to feel like maybe I shouldn't let my Saturday nights be held hostage by this. Like, no matter what, it's like whatever, I can't go out on Saturday because there's fights every Saturday. So I don't necessarily need to be held hostage. So I didn't watch all the fights. My wife and I went out to eat. I was going to go elsewhere. I was going to try to go to Summerfest. And then as time went on and fights were going on, it was like, do I really want to be at Summerfest? I haven't gone to Summerfest in quite some time. So I was feeling how I was feeling. Didn't end up making it to Summerfest, unfortunately, but hope my boys there at Higher Education Records did their fucking thing. Unfortunately, I didn't make it out, unfortunately. But we're gonna talk about fights. We're gonna talk about fights, and if you guys want to follow this podcast on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Babylon5Pod. You guys can email this podcast at Babylon5Podcast@gmail.com. If you guys would like to follow your boy on Twitch, head on over to twitch.tv/Babylon5. If you guys would like to cop that merch, head on over to teespring.com/stores/BOFpod-shop. And lastly, don't just be my Niji, be my patrons. Head on over to patreon.com/Babylon5Pod and you can be my fucking patron today, ladies and gentlemen. We going all out. We swearing. Right out the gate, we swearing, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I'm wildin'. I was like, okay, that's the slideshow. Sorry, I'm very unprepared. Last night, we had Sean Strickland versus Abus Magomedov. I was gonna do midweek babbles. I'm not trying to necessarily do that. I want my midweek babbles to not necessarily be a scheduled thing. I want my midweek babbles to just be me reacting to fight news and just whatever's happening in the world of combat sports. So I want to make it a little more sporadic, but I'm busy. Life happens, so I never really get around to reacting to as much as I want to. But Sean Strickland, leading up to this week's fight, he went on his rant about how he believes we need to get women back out of the workforce and back into the kitchen. And he is just saying some gross shit. Post-fight, he's like, oh, you know what? I didn't mean to say any. I was just talking. I didn't really mean any of those things. It's like, yeah, but you said all those things. You know what I'm saying? You said all those things. in comparison, as a child, I was diehard Eminem fan. You know what I'm saying? Diehard Eminem fan. Now, as a married man, to be honest, to be candid with you people, it's kind of rough at times listening to some of Eminem's material, because like he just talks about beating the shit out of Kim all the time, and I couldn't imagine saying such things about my wife. It's really wild. It's hard to listen to these days, and it's like, oh, were you just doing it for attention? But it's still fucked up that you said it. But performance of the night went to Sean Strickland, who finishes Abu Smagomedov. Also, performance of the night, there's Sultan Ruziboev. I didn't see that fight. I did see the finish. He knocked out that Bruno guy who knocked out RoboCop. He knocked out the guy who knocked out RoboCop in his last fight. Kutalate versus Brenner. Brenner coming out of Charles Oliveira camp. That fight was crazy. Crazy fight. But yeah, last night was a good card. I don't want to actually spend too much time on this because I'm honestly so turned off by fucking Sean Strickland that I don't want to spend too much time talking about him. Behave yourself from here on out, and then we can see if I feel comfortable discussing this man on this platform anymore. But he wins. He wants to fight for a belt, and let's move on. In the co-main event, I believe that was Damir Ismagulov right here versus Grant Dawson. I was even saying to my wife last night that I always confuse Grant Dawson and Jake Matthews for some reason. It's just the two for me are interchangeable, and I always mix up the names. But Grant Dawson dominates Damir Ismagulov, and yeah, it was interesting because, last fight for Damir Ismagulov against Arman Tsarukyan, when he fought Arman Tsarukyan, Arman was able to take him down and control him on the ground. But Damir still looked very high level in the stand-up. And I would say in this fight as well against Grant Dawson, Damir looked high level in this boxing. He said he was going to take him to school or whatever, and he looked to do that, but unfortunately, when he's taken down, he doesn't really seem to know what to do to stand up, to get out of that position. Damir got exposed. I know he retired briefly, came back. I don't know. That hole was exploited by Arman, and Grant Dawson just used that blueprint, and it worked to perfection. Unfortunately for Damir, he's got this glaring hole here. We see that the blueprint on how to beat Damir is out. So shout out to Grant Dawson and his team on perfectly scouting that and dominating that fight. Michael Morales defeats Max Griffin. That was a badass fight. Michael Morales passes the fucking test. Against greedy, hard-nosed veteran Max Griffin, 37 coming in there. He looked great. Michael Morales looked pretty good. Maybe had a fractured orbital bone early in the first round and still toughed it out and beat that ass, man. Michael Morales is the real deal. Benoit Saint Denis defeats Ismael Bonfim in the first round. All right. All over that boy in the first round. I believe Bonfim was the heavy favorite. Heavy favorite going into that one. Benoit Saint Denis dominates. Put that heavy grappling game on him, kept him against the fence, kept that pressure on him, and finishes him with a rear naked choke. It's a pretty good performance by Benoit Saint Denis. As I said, I saw the finish of the Ruzabov Bruno Ferreira fight. Bruno Ferreira knocked out RoboCop in his UFC debut and is then knocked out in the very first round against Nursultan Ruzibov in his UFC debut. What the fuck? This guy is 35, 8, and 2. He's 29 years old. This is the guy. I forgot. I saw a quote and somebody was like, he's 29-year-olds with like 40-something fights. I was like, what the fuck are they talking about? It's this guy right here. This guy right here. 44 fights. Right? Or is this, no, 45 fights. 45 fights. At 29 years old, fighting out of he's fighting out of Philadelphia. He's from Uzbekistan. His nickname is simply Black. I fucks with it. In an unfortunate turn of events for the Motown phenom, Kevin Lee was finished in 55 seconds. He got caught with a straight right. I was watching the Weasel break it down. So early on, so it's 55 seconds of a fight. Renat threw the left jab and then threw an overhand that didn't land flush, but it came in and caught with the forearm. His forearm caught Kevin Lee. So when he came in and threw the jab, Kevin Lee put the arm up to defend the overhand, the right overhand, and Renat came forward with the straight and just got a flash knockout. Lee's on the ground. He shoots for Renat's legs, and he just chokes him out. According to the commentators, from what they were seeing, Kevin Lee went out in went unconscious in about 3 seconds of that choke being applied. Kevin Lee's second run in the UFC starts with a defeat, a 55-second defeat to Renat Fakhretdinov. And niggas is talking about Fakhretdinov, however the fuck you pronounce his name, stepping in and fighting Jack Della Maddalena next week. Jack Della Maddalena lost his opponent against Sean Brady. Sean Brady pulled out of that fight via injury. And Jack Della's putting out the call to fight anybody. I would love to see Renat Fakhretdinov versus Jack Della Maddalena next week, because I would assume Renat has no damage after his 55-second victory. I saw this right here. It's pretty interesting that Michael Morales, who fight on this card, was scheduled to fight Renat Fakhretdinov last year in December. These two guys were scheduled to fight each other. Oh, what a fight that would have been. And people were rolling with Morales. I don't know. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it, ladies and gentlemen, but I would really like to see Renat step in and fight Jack Della Maddalena next. Joe Anderson Brito knocks out Wesley Wilson in the first round. Just brutal ground and pound. Those thuds, like, it was deafening thuds. Boom, boom, boom. And then he knocks Wesley out and then fucking gets on that mic. Like, Dan Ige, you fucking pussy. He wants to fight Dan Ige. Real animated about it. Wants to fight Dan Ige for some reason. I mean, not for some reason, but I mean, he was real fucking heated about it for some reason. Very upset. Elvis Brenner, as I said before, had a great fight against Guram Kutladze. I think that's probably one of my favorite fights of the night. Real standout fight right there, man. That fight was great. Very, very great. Yeah, it was a good card. It was a really good card last night. I didn't watch everything straight through, but when I started watching it, it was like, fuck, I can't go anywhere. I can't go anywhere because I'm watching this fight. So next week, got the stacked card that is UFC 290. Ladies and gentlemen, we have UFC 290. Alexander Volkanovski defends his featherweight belt against interim champion Yair Rodriguez. And in the co-main event, Brandon Moreno defends his flyweight belt against Pantoja. Now it says Moreno Pantoja 2 because the first time they fought was in The Ultimate Fighter, and it was a 2-round fight, so therefore it wasn't technically considered a professional fight. This should be the third fight. This is the third fight between the two gentlemen, but as far as professional is concerned, this is the second fight between Moreno and Pantoja. So this is gonna be a fucking sick card, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about it. You know what's interesting? There's a fight on this card. Alright. Let's talk about the what is it, the red-headed stepchild? Let's talk about that real quick, which is Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis. Now, if we look at Tapology, let's see what the folks saying. 13% actually are rolling with du Plessis here. If you see the videos, James Lynch has all the pro fighters giving their guesses for who they think wins this fight. As I've said, I don't see any fucking real hope for Dricus winning this fight at all. I don't really see any hope. Whittaker is the heavy favorite. This is how I was feeling, but earlier as I was doing some research, right? We're talking about Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis. Now, what's crazy to me, what's really funny, right? When I go to UFC stats, well, that's the wrong fight. When I go to UFC stats, all right, one could surmise by looking at these stats that Dricus actually has a pretty decent chance of winning this fight. If you look at UFC stats, one could surmise Dricus actually has a pretty decent chance at winning this fight. He has the 3-inch reach advantage. All right, he throws more strikes. He throws almost 7 strikes per minute, while Whittaker is about 5. But he's got a 55% accuracy. He lands more than half of what he throws, while Whittaker has a 42% accuracy. Strikes absorbed is pretty much identical, with somehow Dricus has a much lower percentage at 53% and Whittaker at 61%. So then when you come over to the grappling aspect of it all, you see that the takedowns, Dricus attempts about 3 takedowns per 15 minutes per, that's about a takedown each round he attempts. And he's about almost just under a 50% clip of taking you down successfully. You know what I'm saying? And he attempts submissions, while Robert Whittaker is 0. He does not attempt any submissions. If we're looking at the stats, all right, one could surmise that Dricus has a good chance from this, but from just watching fights, bro, just being there live and for Dricus versus Brunson, I was there in Vegas. I saw it all. I was tweeting out dude, Brunson at the end of the first, I was even though he was coming on strong, I was dude, he's gassed. He looks like he's gassing. And sure enough, by the second round, he couldn't do anything, couldn't defend himself. He was gassed out. I could see it early, and that's just been the story of Brunson for the last few fights. If we're just looking at the stats here, one could surmise that Dricus has a pretty good chance at beating Robert Whittaker, but I say nay. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there's no fucking chance this dude beats Robert Whittaker, but the stats say he has a good chance. So do the numbers lie, ladies and gentlemen? I don't know. I guess we'll find out at UFC 290. Headlined Alexander Volkanovski defending his belt against Yair Rodriguez, El Pantera. And Volkanovski, the heavy favorite, minus 435. Alright, heavy favorite. He's got a half-inch reach advantage on Yair, who's 5 inches taller than him. Alright? Volkanovski has the slight reach advantage on the fighter that is 5 inches taller than him. 88%. More people think Volkanovski is going to beat Yair than people on this website think Whitaker is going to beat Dricus du Plessis. Let that sink in. The numbers are wild. The numbers could leave one to surmise DDP is gonna win that fight. But I don't think it's gonna happen. This fight is crazy here. Alright, we all know Yair has his beautiful kicks, his counter kicks. He fights great moving backwards, and we know Volk is gonna come forward. Yair's gonna fight backwards, throwing those like cool ass where he dips down, throws the up elbows. He's gonna do some cool shit in there. I think this fight's gonna be badass at first. But I think early on, I don't know, man. Because I was gonna say like maybe it could be a little back and forth. Maybe we'd see early on who's going to be the hammer, who's going to be the nail, but I don't see Volkanovski being the nail in here. I just see Volk being the hammer. I just see Volk being better than him pretty much everywhere. I don't see Volk being too afraid to go to the ground with Yair. Yair, submitted Josh Emmett from off his back to win the interim belt. I don't think Volk is going to be worried to go anywhere with Yair Rodriguez, and yeah, I feel like Volk is clearly just going to be better than him everywhere, and still Alexander Volkanovski. In the co-main event, Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja 3, as it says here. Alright, the fucking official poster foolishly says 2. But niggas like me and Tapology know this is the third fight, alright? Take that 2 off that fucking poster. And what do the niggas at Tapology think? Who are they rolling with in this fight? They're rolling with Brandon Moreno. Dude, Brandon Moreno has actually put on a lot of muscle since the last fight. I was watching their last fight against each other. And then I watched Brandon Moreno's last fight against Davison Figueiredo. And he looks like he's put on like 60 pounds of muscle. He's a lot bigger than he used to be. He was a little skinny guy, barely any muscle. He was kind of frail before. And in the first fight, Moreno just kept throwing these looping ass hooks. He kept just throwing hooks. That was all he was throwing. And Pantoja was just touching him up with the jab. He was really... Dude, Pantoja beat the shit out of Moreno in the last fight. He was beating that boy's ass. They both have improved since then. Alright. They're saying, at plus 170, Pantoja is the slight underdog, but it's... if you've beaten someone twice coming into this fight, it's insane that you're somehow the underdog. You beat this person twice, and you're the underdog. That's crazy to me. I think we will see what happens, because it's very likely that I could see Pantoja and New, As I just said, he beat him twice already. It's not like it would be a tall ask for Pantoja to beat Moreno. He's done it twice already. And that's why the second Moreno won the belt, he found him backstage, was like, I'm next. I'm fighting for the belt next. Because I already beat that ass twice. Alright. According to the stats, Pantoja throws about one more punch per minute and lands about 80%, just under 50%, while Brandon Moreno just at 40% with his striking accuracy. So one could surmise that with his straight punches, Brandon Moreno has stepped up and has thrown some straight punches and started focusing more on some 1-2s. But there was, even in that fight with Davison, he was throwing some wild looping hooks, even though he did essentially end the fight with a hook that caught Figueiredo in the eye and swelled that bitch shut. Even though that eventually did end the fight, often when he was throwing those hooks, Davison was just slipping everything, just out of range, and then popping him with a jab. I think from the first fight, I'm glad that I watched Pantoja Moreno 2 before I watched Moreno Davison 4, because I was like, why isn't Figueiredo should employ more leg kicks? In the second fight, Pantoja was using a lot of leg kicks on Moreno. He was touching him everywhere. He's using a lot of different techniques, dude. I think Pantoja is going to get the job done. All right? It'd be really cool if Moreno could overcome his demons. He lost this guy twice already. It'd be cool if he could overcome his demons and win this fight. But I am rolling with Alexandre Pantoja, ladies and gentlemen. Also on this card, in the main card for whatever reason, because Bo Nickel threw a temper tantrum. I didn't come here to fight on the prelims. Nigga, you have 4 fights. Alright? You did come here. You shouldn't even be here. And they gotta put you up against Tresean Gore, who only has 6 fights. Because probably neither one of you should be here. It's silly. The Ultimate Fighter makes no sense to me. Alright? Let's get a bunch of fighters who we haven't signed yet, but they're young, upcoming guys, and maybe they could be something. Let's have them fight each other. All these guys who aren't on that level yet, let's have them fight each other to see who's the best of the best at not being on that level yet. And then let's sick them in there with those fucking animals. Watch them get their fucking asses beat. Brian Battle looks great out there. Didn't get finished by Renav. Fuck Renav. You know, I'd like to see Brian Battle versus Kevin Lee next. I'd like to see that fight. But back to this shit here. Bo Nickel versus Tresean Gore. I think Bo Nickel should dominate this fight. I hope if he gets in position to do that head and arm triangle, he does it properly, because that fight could have been finished early had he used proper technique. But even after not using proper technique, I saw that nigga fight live. He fought on the John Jones card, and I'm, a man of reason. I'm screaming from my too expensive seat that, nigga, get off to the side. You're not doing it right. Everybody looking at me like, is this nigga crazy? He trying to tell the fighter what to do? And then after the fight, all you saw all over Twitter, and then he had to answer it, was like, everybody's trying to say I did the technique wrong, but that's just how I do it. And if you knew why I did it, then you would understand that it's a good technique. And it's like, your technique is to just blatantly do it the wrong way. Like, these are techniques that have been perfected. I don't know. It's whatever. I think Bo is going to dominate, finish that fight as he does. Whatever. I think it's a pointless fight. We already talked about Whitaker Duplessis. Got Dan Hooker versus Jalen Turner. That should be a pretty cool fight if we want to. Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price. That could be a fun fight. I think it should be. Yasmin Uruguay versus Denise Gomes. It's Gomez. That could be a pretty good fight there. Pretty good fight. You know what I'm saying? Pretty good fight there. No, we got some good fights, man. These up and coming guys, Pacino. We got Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Minifield. The other racist, that white nigga Cameron Simon, DDP, that other white nigga. You know, it's funny. I saw their coach calling out Ariel Helwani for being racist. Or no, not for being racist, for calling Du Plessis racist. And it's like, you know why he's calling Du Plessis racist? Because what Du Plessis said was racist, nigga. All this backlash didn't come out of nowhere, nigga. You said you're the real African fighting in the UFC, you and Cameron Simon, and you're gonna be the first African champion, African UFC champion. You tried to shit on Israel Adesanya, Francis Ngannou, Kamaru Usman. You put that out there. Nobody asked this fool to say that. I'm rooting against Cameron Simon. Let's see what the stats say. Hopefully they look bad for him. The guy he's fighting is making his debut, so there's no stats on him. I'm a month older than this Terrence Mitchell character. And Cameron Simon, born the year 2000. Young boy. Just a young boy. I don't think he's that good. I think he's got a pretty weak chin. I think your chin's weak, boy. He's got a weak chin. I don't really just fuck with that nigga like that. You know what I'm saying? They racist. They're fucking racist. I don't know what else to tell you about Dricus Du Plessis and that other white nigga, Cameron Simon, other than the fact that the shit they talking, it made me uncomfortable. Made me very uncomfortable. And so when Izzy and all them started going off on it, like, it was for good reason, because as I heard it, it made me feel gross. And then for DDP to have all these people like, hey man, we're offended by this. And he's just like, whatever, you guys don't know what you're hearing. You just don't know what you're hearing. And it's like, nah, bro, it's all recorded. We can play it back right now. You guys just don't know what you're hearing. I never said I was more African. Yeah, but you're now making up new points that we're not arguing. You're making up new points. I never said I was this or that they want that. I never said they weren't African. It's like, man, but you said I'm the real African fighter in the UFC, and that I'm going to be the first African UFC champion. How do you say that and then turn around and say, I never said they weren't African? It all made me uncomfortable. There's no reason for him to put that energy out there, but he did. And I tried to speak out against these white niggas when it happened. And unfortunately, it has snowballed into this. I really wish he didn't try to stand on that. Like, why did he need to stand on that? Once people were offended, and once Kamaru came out, he's trained with Kamaru, he's trained with Israel Adesanya. Once Kamaru came out and was like, yo, man, you gotta watch what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't know how people are going to watch it. He still stood on it. There was no, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I apologize if it came off that way. I didn't mean to say it like that. Nah, he's like, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, keep that nonsense away from me. We can't wait to see Robert Whittaker beat the shit out of Dricus Du Plessis at UFC 290. But if you look at the stats, one could surmise Dricus gets it done. One could surmise that Dricus gets it done if you look at the stats. If you look at those stats, man, he could very well get that shit done. So, I hope it doesn't happen. I really hope it doesn't. I mean, if it does happen, it's cool, because then I get to see Adesanya beat that ass. But I really don't think it's gonna happen. But whatever happens, happens, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys would like to follow this podcast on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Babylon5Pod. You guys can email this podcast at Babylon5podcast@gmail.com. If you guys would like to follow this podcast on Twitch, head on over to twitch.tv/Babylon5. If you guys would like to cop that merchandise, head on over to teespring.com/store/BOFpod-shop. And lastly, don't just be my niche, be my patrons. Head on over to patreon.com/Babylon5Pod and you can be my patrons today. Thank you guys so much for being here for episode 202. UFC 290 is stacked, ladies and gentlemen. It is stacked. And I am getting the fuck up out of here. See you guys next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves and each other. And I'll see you when I see you. I'll holla.